All right, today we're talking about Sam Bankman-Fried, not SBF, as I and many others have incorrectly referred to him in the past. That's why there's quotation marks in the title. I'll explain why that distinction matters in just a second. No, quite deliberately, we will be discussing Bankman-Fried and his colossal fraud case that is about to dominate the news cycle for an as of yet undetermined period of time. Brace yourselves. You are about to see a tremendous amount of coverage aimed in his direction, and I suppose I should explain why it matters that we call him Bankman-Fried and pointedly ignore the wonderkin term SBF, which he apparently coined for himself while rising to fame in the crypto industry. See, here's an example of what I'm talking about. In early 2019, a celebrity named Daniel Hernandez, also known by his rapper name Tekashi69, pled guilty to 9 criminal charges, and while it's important to recognize a popular moniker in opening statements, when someone is a criminal, you don't extend them the flattery of referring to them by their self-professed stage name during the legal process. This article right here is a very good example from NPR, where the opening statements and title reference 6ix9ine, but the rest of the content focuses on his legal name, as the relevant material is then discussed. We can see that after the initial use of his preferred nickname, there are 9 different instances where NPR refers to him as Hernandez, and that's procedural. That's how it should be. Well, flip that over to Bankman-Fried and the picture substantially changes. Yeah, in August of 2023, NPR writer David Gura was discussing news of Bankman-Fried's bail having been revoked, but the terminology is inverted. After initially calling him Sam Bankman-Fried in the headline, the article goes on to use his self-coined crypto wonderkin nickname SBF 10 times in the rest of the content. Now, for some people, that may not seem like a big deal. Who cares? It didn't seem like one to me either until someone very harshly pointed this out to me based on my own prior coverage. But let's really consider what's happening. A crypto fraudster of the highest order who executed one of the largest single-minded wealth destruction events in history, bolstered by the media at every single turn, something I'll demonstrate soon, with a self-made whiz kid nickname when that nickname was used at the height of his influence in a veritable cult of personality, is now continuing to be referenced in the flattering way that he chooses. Why is the media, in this case NPR in particular, inverting their standard policy of using someone's legal name in favor of using a crypto degenerate's self-made title after that degenerate was directly responsible for the loss of billions? That's a question we all need to ask ourselves, especially media outlets like NPR. But anyway, it's a very long-winded explanation, but that is the reason why I will only be referring to this person as Bankman-Fried. All right, with all that out of the way, let's go back in time. August of 2021. In truth, it's not so long ago, but the landscape of who Bankman-Fried was and how the industry perceived him was vastly different back then. August 12th, 2021, a journalist by the name Roger Parloff publishes an extensive profile on Bankman-Fried in Yahoo Finance, a profile that was then prominently featured by the platform to all of its readers. Now, the article is fairly well written, as in has a decent grasp of how to write in a compelling way with the English language, but let me just read a paragraph here to give you an idea of its atmosphere. Quote, "This article aims to shed light on whether Bankman-Fried can achieve his audacious goal, persuading the world's regulators to fashion new rules to accommodate his fait accompli exchange. It is the most in-depth profile so far of Bankman-Fried, perhaps the most pioneering young entrepreneur of our time. It draws chiefly on interviews with 8 people, including more than 5 hours of conversations with 4 who know him extremely well, plus more than 4.5 hours of Zoom interviews with Bankman-Fried himself." End quote. That is very, very obviously a puff piece article. The profile carried glowing praise, massive assumptions, and by itself, in a vacuum, one might say that this was just a random journalist wrapped up in the cult of personality that Bankman-Fried was able to build. Well, one might be forgiven for thinking that, but reality is not so kind. See, Roger Parloff, many years prior to this, also wrote a glowing profile on Elizabeth Holmes, CEO of Theranos Corporation. For those that don't know, Theranos was an example of medical and finance fraud on an enormous scale, meaning that Roger Parloff isn't just caught up in the churn of normal industry writing with one slipped-up puff piece. He's actually been on the cutting edge of elevating 2 of the largest frauds in recorded history. Good job, dude. Still, August of 2021 is a far cry from FTX's downfall, so let's skip ahead a little bit. Ignoring the bevy of articles and profiles that pushed FTX higher and higher in the world of finance, at the time the publications didn't know, they were just following trends, so not all of them can be blamed, we arrive at the fated day where FTX actually imploded, and the media frenzy truly began. This is where things took a turn, and it became strikingly obvious just how far certain writers and publications were willing to go in defense of Bankman-Fried. A notable example of this would be Gideon Lewis Krause, writing for The New Yorker, authoring very soft-handed critiques such as, quote, Sam Bankman-Fried, Effective Altruism and the Question of Complicity. That article focuses extensively on the concept of effective altruism, but here's an example of the atmosphere achieved. Quote, in 2017, Bankman-Fried launched Alameda Research as an explicitly EA, effective altruism-minded proprietary trading firm. As one early Alameda employee told me, something really amazing happened because we were all EAs and we all believed ourselves to be value aligned. We were all on the same team, making money not for ourselves, but to make the world better. I've been in startups my whole career, and this was something I'd never seen before. Everyone was genuinely just trying to do their part and trying to do it as efficiently and effectively as they could, and just trusting that we were all on the same team. And the reason I was as upset with Sam as I was is because, in my view, he defected. Everyone played cooperate for months, and he defected and destroyed the commons, end quote. Now, it is obviously possible to write with nuance and still be fair to circumstances, but let's just read the final paragraph here, and you tell me what the final note seems to indicate. Keep in mind, this came after the world had learned that Bankman-Fried was almost certainly responsible for the destruction of billions of dollars, having totally betrayed the user base of FTX in the most egregious ways possible under the banner of effective altruism. Quote, in other words, Bankman-Fried was going out of his way to emphasize the purportedly neglected virtue of being a good person. In his assessment of McCaskill, at the very least, I tend to agree. When my profile appeared, McCaskill disputed my characterization of him as a reluctant prophet. But now the ship of effective altruism is in difficult straits, and he, like Jonah, has been thrown overboard. While McCaskill lies in the belly of the big fish, the fate of effective altruism hangs in the balance. Jonah, accepting the burden of duty, eventually went to Nineveh, I think is how you say it, and told the truth about transgression and punishment. At the end of that story, the sinners of that city donned sackcloth and ashes and found themselves spared, end quote. Yeah, he goes biblical and basically reframes the discussion about effective altruism. Because why? A crypto con man stole billions of dollars, but he was trying to be a good person. Look, they even have a special name for their group of good people. Here's the thing. Most people probably don't know or care what effective altruism is, but to briefly summarize, it's a group of people that pretend their mission is to do as much good as possible, while maximizing the effect of their resources. It's a movement of shallow, snappy taglines and really fake people. Science, evidence, and reason, maximized charitable impact, etc., just bullshit. But when the skin hits the pavement, what are they really about? To be clear, the discussion of Bankman-Fried is still constantly framed around the concept of effective altruism. From Cointelegraph just a couple of days ago, quote, effective altruism fueled SBF's ridiculous actions at FTX, end quote, which is an article that goes on to say, prevalent throughout the tech circles of Silicon Valley and quantitative finance firms in New York, Bharadwaj said effective altruism was an alluring and integral part of the cultural DNA at FTX and Alameda Research. Okay, that's interesting, I suppose, but again, what are these people really about? Well, according to details emerging from the fire hose of lawsuits currently being filed all over the place, we can see that one of the goals that Gabriel Bankman-Fried had, effective altruist brother of Sam Bankman-Fried, was to buy a private island and make a luxury underground bunker. Let's be sure not to get it twisted here. The effective altruists who pretend to do as much good as possible wanted to spend millions of dollars on a deluxe underground bunker to keep them and their inner circle alive during God only knows what. And we're supposed to believe that is how you do as much good as possible? Yeah, really? I'll do you one even better. Sequoia Capital, a venture capital firm with its own set of problems lately, shortly before the collapse of FTX full-on happened, like very shortly before the collapse, wrote a puff piece titled, I shit you not, Sam Bankman-Fried has a savior complex, and maybe you should too. Yeah, unironically, less than 2 months before it all imploded, they wrote that headline, and in it, they heavily emphasized the utilitarian teachings of Bankman-Fried's parents, Joseph Bankman and Barbara Fried. That upbringing is now correlated to Bankman-Fried's poster child status and obsession with the effective altruism movement. But his parents? Yeah, let's just have a gander at them. See, also part of the numerous lawsuits that are coming out recently, we can see publicly that Bankman-Fried's parents were heavily involved, including an email from general counsel, including Joseph Bankman, that reads, quote, how assets including primary residence can be structured to be bankruptcy remote. Basically, let's dodge bankruptcy with a bunch of our money. Further adding, it would be great, all else equal, if we could have the founders put money into property in the Bahamas with a direct link to offshore asset protection. Yeah, not only that, but the father and mother were receiving exorbitant amounts of money as well on top of it. So the parents of an effective altruist who wants to use everyone's money to build a bunker on a private island, that being Gabriel Bankman-Fried, enrich themselves while insulating that money from bankruptcy, as their son Sam Bankman-Fried mismanaged billions and destroyed lives, later declaring bankruptcy. Like, do you see the pattern here? All that, and we're not even done. The media has so pathetically and grossly sanitized Bankman-Fried's reputation, it makes me sick. From the Wall Street Journal, a title they have now rightfully, shamefully changed, when Sam Bankman-Fried's crypto empire went down in flames, so did his plans to save the world. A title that now reads, Sam Bankman-Fried said he would give away billions. Broken promises are all that's left. Better, but still not great. Still, nothing comes even close by comparison when we look at one of the most recent PR campaigns out there from a man named Michael Lewis. Michael Lewis on CBS 60 Minutes, which used to actually be fucking good, not anymore, decided to just go all in for Bankman-Fried, effectively whitewashing the entire thing in one of the most pathetic displays of self-delusion I've seen in a very long time. He wrote an entire book about it, and the crux of the issue is that he believes Bankman-Fried is misunderstood. Nope, you heard that right. He thinks that the man responsible for destruction of wealth on an unprecedented scale, showcasing unimaginable levels of corruption, from political donations, even dark ones, to fraud and beyond, is just misunderstood, guys. And making it even better, guess who came back around for another swing, with probably the only positive review for such garbage? That's right, Gideon Lewis Krause. Yep. He frames the book as stupefyingly pleasurable to read, perfectly paced, extremely funny, and fills in many gaps in a story that had been subjected to an unholy amount of reporting. Sounds about right. The list of examples goes on for quite some time. Outlets framing Caroline Ellison, complicit in the fraud as a main player in Alameda Research, as a misunderstood math whiz. But rather than fixating on individual examples, I want to once again draw your attention to a much, much wider pattern. For some unknown reason, the media is deliberately sanitizing Sam Bankman-Fried's reputation. Some outlets are much more aggressive than others, obviously, and while I can't precisely tell you why they're doing it, maybe the money ties back in, but I'm not done examining that part yet, I can say that it's a disgusting example of modern journalism that should be condemned with the harshest terms possible. Effective altruism is an embarrassing stain on the face of modern society, run by people who quite obviously put narcissistic personal fulfillment above anyone and everyone else around them. Supporting or downplaying the crimes and actions of Bankman-Fried is undeniable journalistic failure. And yet, as the trial continues, we should all brace ourselves for a barrage of opinions and think pieces that try and reframe this fraud scheme as something, anything, other than what it was. Don't let them do that. They should be criticized mercilessly until they are so ashamed to continue running defense that they just don't do it anymore, because they're running defense for someone who quite literally destroyed an untold number of lives. That's it. If you like the content, please consider Local's Patreon and channel memberships. Also, plenty more links down below, but I'll cut it there and stop rambling. This one got me heated. I apologize for that. As always, thank you all for watching and have a nice night.